Have you ever felt lonely in the company of a few hundred people? That's the way I felt when I stepped onto the stage. So I'm going to establish rapport with you now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a sentence, and when I stop, I want all of you to shout the next word into the lecture hall to let me know that I'm not alone and that you're not avatars, but real people. Got the message? I say a sentence, I stop, and when I give you this signal, you all shout the next word into the lecture theatre. So here's my sentence. Yes, admittedly, it is a charitable project, and normally I'd be very happy to make a donation. Yes. How on earth did you know? My next word was going to be but, and all of you guessed that. Telepathy? No, it is because I used anticipators. Anticipators are elements and signals that focus on what is to come. The anticipators that I used were yes, and they were admittedly, normally, I would instead of I will, and most importantly, rising intonation up to the comma, but. Because of our experience with speech patterns and interaction, we're often ahead of the speakers, even formulating our response in our minds while they are still talking. Typical turn-taking patterns, typical conversational patterns in interaction are an accusation triggers a counter-accusation or a rejection. An attack triggers defense. Criticism triggers justification. And an argument triggers a counter-argument, and an allegation triggers refutation. Do you recall your first refutation in early childhood? Correct. It wasn't me. Do you remember how you first tried a counter-argument on your parents? It's bedtime, but I'm not tired. Yawn, yawn. So let us coin a new term for these speech patterns, these predictable patterns. And let's call them the communicative factory setting, because we acquired and indeed mastered these turn-taking patterns in our early childhood. Nobody in the world needs training for that. And let's call them communicative factory setting because they produced us in our families, as it were, the communicative factory that produced us. Communicative factory settings are appropriate and standard in certain settings of discourse, such as parliamentary debates and talk shows. They're poison when we are negotiating. They are the reason why meetings are often unnecessarily prolonged. They are the reason why collective bargainings often come to a grinding halt. And they are the reason why, sadly, partnerships break up. Marriages do not end in divorce because after 20 years of married bliss, one of the partners wakes up one morning realizing, oh my God, you look ugly. Okay, let me take you through a negotiation conducted in the spirit of the communicative factory setting. The president of a citizens' initiative had an appointment with a politician who was responsible for town planning. The proposal was to replace the existing car park by a beautiful harbor promenade. To this proposal, the politician responded by saying, in principle, that is a great idea, a wonderful idea indeed, and I do appreciate citizens coming to me with visions, but we do not have sufficient parking spaces. As a matter of fact, we're desperately short of them. Now, this statement wasn't entirely true. As a matter of fact, there were other areas, even suitable ones. So the predictable response was, but we do have alternatives. Think of the areas X, Y, and Z. Why is it that we cannot resist the seductiveness of a good argument? That's your take-home message, by the way. So the predictable counter-argument that the politician came up with was, but these areas are too far away from where we need their shoppers. But the harbour promenade would attract them. But we need the revenues from the parking fees. If we attract more tourists, the town would profit even more. Do you know how much it had cost me to have that car park built on the waterfront only 4 years ago? 3.6 million euros. Giving up that area as a car park is something I could never explain to the voters. Huh? Is votes, votes, votes all you politicians can ever think about? But the time interval is too short for such drastic change in town planning. We can't jump onto the bandwagon at any moment. Okay, so far, so bad. Now let me take you through this negotiation, again, this time step by step. As you remember, the politician's first counter-argument was, in principle, that is a great idea, a wonderful idea indeed, and I do appreciate people coming to me with visions, anticipates, but, the predictable but. Now let's assume that the president of the Citizens' Initiative had responded by saying, when I made inquiries about a contact person, your name was the first to come up, and I'm happy I followed that recommendation because you immediately saw that this was a great idea, a wonderful idea. Do you know of any towns where this, as you aptly put it, vision has become reality? So my first message to you is, do not go for what is in dispute, go for what has been conceded, go for the concessions. And let's coin a new term for this, let's call it the conceded territory. Focusing on the conceded territory, as demonstrated just now, makes the difference between negotiating opponents and negotiating partners. It makes the difference between stagnation and dynamic negotiation. We're now in a position to start formulating the first strategies for dynamic negotiating. Strategy number 1, do not be misguided by anticipators. Do not go for what is in dispute, focus on the conceded territory. Number 2, position the negotiating partner by asking questions, as demonstrated, not by giving your solution. Now here comes a challenge. What if the conceded territory has not been made explicit? The town politician said, giving up this area as a car park is something I could never explain to the voters. Concealed below the surface is the conceded territory. The subtext, which means what the politician really meant, can be rephrased as, if you can sell this to the voters, you can do with the car park whatever you like. So strategy number 3 is, if an objection doesn't cover the whole spectrum of possibilities, this objection is to be interpreted, paradoxically, as consent. When, in the 20th century, a man proposed to a young maiden, and she protested by saying, "But this is so sudden," it meant yes. So, strategy number 4, watch out for presuppositions. Presuppositions are that part of a statement that survives, miraculously, negations. The politician had said, but the time interval is too short for such a drastic change in town planning. Of course, we would have preferred him to say, but the time interval is not too short, that is the negation. But within the framework of dynamic negotiation, it doesn't make any difference. It's neither here nor there whether he says the time interval is too short or the time interval is not too short, because in either case, has he accepted the idea of a beautiful harbour promenade? We are now only talking about the time factor. It can't get any better than that, can it? Because he has now accepted what was at issue only 60 seconds ago. Okay. However, when I expound the strategies of dynamic negotiation to people, in particular when I demonstrate it in real case scenarios, they usually come up with the objection, but you are manipulating people who only have the communicative factory setting at their disposal. I love objections. Because, as you all have spotted now, the conceding territory is in that statement. So my response to that is, you've drawn my attention to the fact that because dynamic negotiation is a powerful instrument, it carries the danger of being misused for the purpose of manipulation. Would it allay your concerns if we distinguished between manipulating people to their disadvantage on the one hand, and on the other hand, positioning people in order to construct solutions along the lines of the dynamic negotiating strategies, and making the latter the guiding principle of our governance? If you systematically apply the strategies of dynamic negotiation with the conceded territory at its core, your life will never be the same again, because people's reaction towards you will be different, and in the wake of these change reactions, your personality will change, because our personalities are, to a certain extent, shaped by the way we communicate with each other. Now, from early childhood bedtime disputes to United Nations issues, we negotiate everywhere and all the time. The good news is you can practice it as you're walking out of that door. Put it to the test, give it a try, and may the conceded territory be with you. Good luck. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.